Namaskar, welcome to Insight with Ashok Vyas, and today we have a theme that is interesting as well as stimulating for one and all, because we all want to be one with truth and truth on all levels, including politics and media. What has happened with the arrival of social media on the scene and participation of millions of people, or rather billions of people on social media, we have started witnessing unmasking, and now that we are in the phase of unmasking ourselves after this COVID-19 is receding, unmasking of values which were pretentiously said to be the values of functioning, whether it is in the field of politics or media. And before I open up to my panelists, I also want to recollect the recent advertisement of seeking reporters which would write articles that directly, indirectly was suggesting would be anti-Modi. And it is not a hidden truth that New York Times has always mentioned Hindu Nationalist Party leader and surge of Hindu politics in India for Prime Minister Modi. And many times, if there was some news, they'll come up with a lot of background material which would be used to damage the image of glowing image of Prime Minister Modi. So there would be different opinions on that. But let me have first the pleasure of welcoming someone who is joining us via Zoom. And the gentleman is very familiar and not just a familiar face, but a voice that speaks to a lot of people through various forums. Namaste, Vibhuti, welcome.
Namaste. Happy 4th of July. Thank you very much for inviting me today. Thank you.
I appreciate you could join. And so, frankly speaking, is the theme, and we will have some frank questions for Vibhuti, but also insightful and frank questions for Professor Sanjay Patel, who also joins us. Namaste.
Namaste.
And very brief comments from both of you. We as laymen or members of the society expect certain integrity from news portals, newspapers, media in general. Do you think that is happening, or there is a disconnect between what they portray or claim to be and what they actually practice? So let us open with Vibhuti ji. Where do you rate, and you have recently heard New York Times ad?
Yeah, I read about it, and we talked about it in a couple of other forums. Yes, even if they do not specifically mention Mr. Modi's name, what is important is to see the intent and the content of the requirement of a person they want to be commenting on Indian matters, particularly the 2024 election is coming. So it's no secret that the Western media has attacked India on the Hindutva agenda. They consider Prime Minister Modi to be the leader of the Hindutva movement in India, although it is not true. He has done a resurgence of Hinduism. He has created a sense of pride in Hindu nationality or Hindu being as the people are. So the New York Times advertisement, it smacks of the famous Greta Thunberg toolkit machination. And I had said it many times that after the Democratic Party deposed President Trump, they will go to India to depose Prime Minister Modi. They did.
So, allow me to interrupt you. And
so the question here is, that is that narrative for job fulfillment valid? It shows their values. It shows that they are totally anti-India. It shows that whatever is happening, a Hindu resurgence that is happening in India, they are opposed to it. So, and they have had an anti-India slant for a very long time. So much so that many Indians have refused to renew their subscriptions, or they have cancelled the subscription, because the bias is very obvious. Absolutely. They were supposed to be unbiased, but they are trying to impose their will on unsuspecting minds. They think that we will be driven away. But thanks to technology, we are able to thrash issues for ourselves now. We don't need to read New York Times 99 pages. It's a good place.
So yeah,
It's a
Vibhuti,
good material for trash.
I seek your permission to interrupt you to bring back to you with little bit input from Professor Sanjay Patel on the basic theme with which we are trying to understand the role which New York Times is playing, and now it is like unmasking of being unbiased media of New York Times with this seeking of a reporter who many in India are referring that they are seeking toxic reporters from India.
Right.
So Professor Patel, we are witnessing gradually more than ever. We live in a world where narrative building has also become a kind of tool which is being used to harm a person, a philosophy, or any party that you consider is opposing your standpoint, which is fine in one sense, but when such as Vibhuti ji said, supposed to be unbiased, so this is like cheating. This is like cheating. This is like match fixing. So talk to me about your take on this.
It's very unfortunate that media has become more slanted. The original purpose was to be unbiased, to give objective opinion, objective facts, and let the citizens, the readers, to make the decision on what it is. It's unfortunate that media has become a tool for campaigning and to promoting certain agendas. And obviously it should not be done that way, but because it is being used, the public, they're being misinformed. And because of that, we're seeing more and more people drift away from what is actually occurring factually. But thank God that we do have the internet, so we can search to find out what is actually the facts and truth are. But media has become, in that sense, I would hate to use the word corrupted, but there is a sense of corruption in there if their ideas are going to be biased and not give objectivity, because they are trying to support the sponsor or the institution that is perhaps funding them in some sense. And this is a very big issue that we have currently in our modern times.
Absolutely. And Vibhuti, now let's look at the root cause for such a situation. Do you think it is the role of somebody using his power of money and making these media as a tool with certain agenda that, as we in America say, put your money where your mouth is? So, I mean, what could be the reason? Because New York Times has such a long history of being a very respectable media, and New York Times is just one reference point. What I'm asking you also applies to several media houses in India also. So your thoughts, why this sort of, if I use the word animosity, which is camouflaged with a kind of one-sided research or one-sided narrative?
Yeah, Ashokji, what you have said is correct. You brought in the role of money. There was a time, and which Professor Patel also talked about, they were supposed to be unbiased reporters. You report, public decides to see whether it is valid or not. You want to believe one thing or the other. But in the later tradition, as you know, New York Times, because of the technological change and because of the fact that people were consuming news in many more different ways, it ran into severe financial trouble. And at one point in time, many print media were having a tough time surviving. And lo and behold, you have significant amount of Chinese money that has come in to support many media companies in the US. And Chinese are practical people. They're pragmatic businessmen. They extract, to use the proverbial phrase from Shakespeare, their own pound of flesh. So the point is very simple. It has recently been reported that Chinese Communist Party or some of the agencies have pumped in lots of money to Washington Post, LA Times, and you see a very Washington Post, LA Times, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, they have supported, they have made financial contributions. And what has happened is you suddenly see an anti-India bashing going on. There is no day when LA Times is not talking about a caste-related issue on India. Everything has been termed as such. And I had said it before that there are 2 issues or 3 issues on which the Western media will try to dislodge Mr. Modi is based on that anything and everything that he does will be colored as human rights violation. It will be assertion of Hinduism, Hindutva. And the third one would be that he doesn't he doesn't care for anything, caste part. So these are the narrative that is being built to unsettle him, unsettle India. And this is a war where they enroll people in India using the democratic aspirations of people. So all lot of democratic words, the lofty ideals of democracy will be used to justify their action. Even Twitter said that we are trying to protect democracy. Come on.
Okay, so let me bring another angle to this, Professor Patel. And there are some, I have seen, say, 10 Indian newspapers or media at least who are mentioning what Vibhuti has said, that New York Times is slanted or tilted towards this. But there are some like the Quint and others which say that this is a misplaced criticism of New York Times advertisement for seeking a reporter who is critical of establishment. How do you see this way? The reader who is trying to see the objective picture, he gets confused because you have both sides trying to strengthen their point of view. It's an interesting area to be time to be in, where you have so many sources of information, but at the same time it could be quite confusing. So what is your advice?
First of all, it's very alarming to see a journalist trying to slant an idea to establish himself, which actually, as I had mentioned, it is just injustice to the profession, but it's just injustice to the craft, because the whole point here is that if we do not present any information without any biasness, the society will always, they follow what the overall picture is, and people love negativity. People love sensationalism. Yes, as we just mentioned, it does increase the viewership, it increased the readership, but at what cost? How does the average person actually be able to decipher fiction from truth, or opinions from facts? And it becomes very daunting for them, because they will just use whatever they read, and their thinking will be very easily slanted depending on their mindset. Because if Modi has done such great work for India, what he's done in 10 years, no one has done in 60 years, people are waiting for one little mistake for Modi to make, and they want to tramp him, right? And this is what we see. And the media is trying. Why is the media after Modi on one level? Because India is rising. Money's pouring in. Production is growing. So this becomes a competition for the Western world, and this creates a clash. So we're seeing this as a tool to perhaps slow down that growth.
So there are two ways of looking at it. One, we criticize, which of course is necessary, and again I say that New York Times is one example. And Vibhuti, there are several issues where we feel that one party has taken a stand which is not fair, whether it is a media or a politician. And when I say fair, and now as I'm talking to you and I having heard you on several forums, so there are voices which are consistently collecting, gathering, creating, mixing material which would be termed as anti-Hindu or anti-India or anti-Modi, of course. Now, we bring that to the attention of people is one way, but then to counter it, as you and I have heard as child, that if you want to reduce the size of one line, then you draw another big line near it. So do you see something like that happening in the space where we still see people making use of the term secularism though they themselves are not practicing secularist ideology, but somehow it is flowing as a well-established narrative that you get away with it, though you are actually doing exactly the same thing with more force and venom that which you are objecting.
You are absolutely correct in your assessment. Important part is, as Professor Patel astutely pointed out, that the Western world, somewhere along the line, is unable to contend with the reality that India is rising. Under Prime Minister Modi, he realized that India needs to become an economic power on its own, and therefore he has attracted significant amount of economic growth, brought about changes. The Western world is not able to deal with that. That a sleepy country, which they took it for granted, which the imperialism and colonialism ruled for as many years, that country in 67 years or 80 years of its existence as independent country, so to say, despite having a culture of more than 10,000 years ago old, we are rising. And it's a very important part to figure out. I'm not against anybody having a different point of view. That is the essence of democracy. You debate, you dialogue, you question, and you argue, you assert your point of view. But there is a very important philosophical element which I see here, is that the rise of Hinduism that is happening, the rise of India that is happening, Prime Minister Modi is fulfilling Vivekananda's call to arise, awaken, and assert. And I have added the fourth A to that, act. And what he has done is, he's begun to act on various issues that were seemingly intractable. So there you go, you have a scenario that this upsets the geopolitical leftist agenda that you see happening in America as well. So you can see the wokeism that has come in America. So these are issues that are remarkably important, and this needs to be discussed. And thanks to technology, we are conversing regardless of where we are.
Absolutely.
So,
and
yeah.
Professor Sanjay is also deeply rooted in Indian cultural study. And when you hear Vibhuti mentioning few times that rise of Hinduism, and I was just thinking in my mind, is it for real? Because we still have Hindu temples controlled by government, and there have been lynching of Hindu sadhus which government at the center didn't raise a critical voice at the time. There have been killing of, as we hear after post-election in Bengal, where innocent Hindus have had to flee to Assam to save their lives, and many got killed, and that thing is still being investigated. So when we say Hindu rise, is it for real is one question. So let's begin with this one with you. Do you agree with Vibhutiji's assessment of Hindu rise?
When we discuss the rise of India, rise of Hindu, we're looking at it from an economic perspective, right? But Vibhutiji makes a good point as well, that because India is thousands of years old, the values have been ingrained deeply in the psyche of each individual. It has gone to the subconscious state of mind. And India is not just rising economically, but because it is rising economically, now it takes a stand in the global front. Therefore, the culture also becomes now visible for others to see. The cultural aspect is what will also rise with India simultaneously. And this is very important because India is not just based on materialism, not capitalism or just democracy. India has a foundation of, of Vedic culture that has transcended time. And that is what's going to eventually be the powerhouse to take us even further from where we are. And yes, Modi ji has done the first steps. The basic step is, as we say, Shakti. Shakti has to be built. He built the Shakti based on economics and materialism, and this is where we have to start from the foundation, and then we can move forward as well.
Absolutely. And Vibhuti, continuing with what you have sort of shown the light of Hindu rise, and now I'm again not getting into the question of whether it is for real or not, but even the thought of Hindu having their assertive voice is kind of seen as unsettling of the secular fabric, and rightly or wrongly the narrative starts growing that it is going to be threatening for minorities, and especially the minority which is more vocal in India. So your thoughts on this apprehension which you often hear, that if there is a strong Hindu voice, then it is going to have adverse effect on the rights of minorities.
It is nothing to do with the right of minorities. Nothing at all to do with the right of minorities. What is important here, as Professor mentioned, that our history, our culture, it has roots in Vedic belief system. And our Vedic belief system is entirely science-based. It's about nature, eternal principles. They are never wrong. They are evolving principles. Whereas the Abrahamic faiths have a directional kind of thing. You do this, you follow the book, whether it's Bible or Quran. I have no problem with that. If you want to choose that path, so be it. Be happy with that. Don't tell me that I'm wrong about my prescription or my following. What is happening now is the advent of science and technology. It's breaking the barriers of ignorance and fear, which were the two driving force of the Abrahamic faith. They issue you passport and visa to go to heaven or hell. We don't have such concepts at all, right? Who has ever seen heaven or hell? Nobody has seen. I always ask this question of my friends who are on the other side of the fence. Hey, what's your experience in heaven? Anything you can relate with me? I might want to live in hell because there is a lot of everything that is evil, considered evil, branded evil, but is essential to live. I ask questions that we gave the world. The God-given element of man and woman's union is a creation of life force. We gave the world Kama Sutra, you call it sin. So if you are living perpetually in sin, how unhappy the life you are leading. So there are questions. What has happened is that we have begun to inquire. And Sanatan principles, the people who are turning against religion, established religion, they are embracing the science-based Sanatan policies. The pity is only one, that we haven't bothered to propagate our values. That's our failing. Whereas they bring about their religious conversion to our land, which is Sanatani land. We don't object to that. But imagine that people are following a foreign land's religious belief system in a land which is not fine-tuned to it. So there is a very interesting element that the world is becoming aware that thunder and lightning doesn't happen because gods are angry.
I think
Right.
you made many important points, and I'll just continue with this line of thought. If you have majority considering a river as a pious river, and then there are others who not just question, they actually deride it, they actually laugh at the idea of worshipping the forms of God without appreciating the philosophical base which leads to significance of worship with form or worship in formless way. So that openness is a part of this fabric. But I'll just have slight reference to Vibhuti ji mentioning about Swarg Nark. I think in Hinduism also that concept is seen in Puranas, but again in the broad brush, as Vibhuti ji said, it is more in tune to the natural element. So everything is sort of pious and reverential. That is the thing. But now coming back to the theme with which we started, unmasking. So there are certain values that criminals need to be punished, and there should be justice. And recently there is one statement by Chief Minister of Assam, Hemant Biswas, and he said in the context of one criminal's escaping and the police shot. So he said that this should be the pattern. So if anybody is trying to escape the custody, that police have the right to shoot. Now, this leads to a very sort of settling space, because here sitting chief minister making a statement which might empower police force with something which might be used in a way which may go against the norms of the law. So your thoughts on, so this is also unmasking. I mean, on the one hand he is also appreciating the need to have justice function properly.
This is a very delicate situation for the minister. You know, we understand his main priority is for the protection of the citizens and the people. When we see that, for the example you had just given us, where a criminal has escaped and running, and if the police are given full authority or a leniency to just shoot, what it does, it creates a society of fear, because now the citizens will begin to fear if they are doing some criminal behavior, if it's not even criminal without being, you know, properly justified as an act of crime, that they may also, you know, become possibly targets. There has to be other ways to apprehend criminals properly, and then without, you know, becoming, as they say, trigger happy. This is something that, I mean, at the same time, I do believe that we have to protect the citizens. We have to use sometimes aggressive force where needed, but there has to be a fine line between just using aggression and then, of course, using proper tactics to apprehend criminals.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Vibhuji, as we move towards the concluding part of our conversation, bringing back the role of social media in unmasking values, and there are so many fact checkers across the globe now. So if you say something which is incorrect, somebody can come up with your previous statement,
Right,
or a picture where you are seen with somebody, etc. So along with this, Vibhuti, there is so much, if I may say, toxic material which is floating around on the social media. So what would be your advice for a common consumer of the news through social media? What are the precautions that you can recommend?
that's a very good point, because what happens is that, you know, the technology allows you to morph pictures. You know, you can twist the news, you can delete a certain words and give a different meaning to all of it. So I will go back to using the, you know, use your wiser judgment in terms of possibility and in terms of making a call. There is always an opportunity to check back. One thing which I do know is that technology has definitely introduced an essential component of some amount of integrity in everyone.
Absolutely.
You can't lie anymore and get away with it.
I think that's a great space where we can leave today. The theme unmasking of values in media and politics. It puts us at the seat of responsibility to use our discretion, and as in the field of medicine, many times the second opinion matters. The same way, I think, for our consumption of news and for framing of our views and opinion, we need to have sort of a wide range of sources of information. So that is the additional responsibility. I hope you would agree with me, Professor Sanjay Patel, on that. I appreciate your presence with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
And Vibhuti ji, always a pleasure to,
Thank you, sir.
to listen to you. And so this is something which helps us in becoming more alert and aware about our position in our contemporary world. With lots of good wishes, thanks to my panelists and thanks to all of you for being a part of this conversation. This is Ashok Vyas. Namaste.